Hello, I am the Reverend Maggie Helwig. I am the incumbent at the Church of St. Stephen in the Fields in Kensington Market. I will start by explaining the title of my talk. Some of you may have heard about our statue of Jesus as Panhandler by Timothy Schmaltz, which we have outside our church. It was stolen, and then it got brought back, and then his head fell in, and it was a whole big thing. But there's a great deal of poverty and homelessness in our community, and for a lot of the very marginalized people in the community, this statue became very important. It was a representation of Jesus as one of them in a very profound way. Anyway, one of the street-involved Aboriginal guys who comes in to talk to me came in one day with a friend of his and sort of brought her into my office and said, okay, this is Mother Maggie. You need to talk to Mother Maggie for a bit, so I'm just going to plunk you down in her office here, and you talk, and I'll be outside with Jesus. I thought, that's brilliant. This is like, dude, somebody sent you here with that line. There's a lot that goes on outside with Jesus, but the aspects that are sort of central to the work we're trying to do at St. Stephen's, with the help at the moment of funding from the Ministry Allocation Fund, which we greatly appreciate, are that sort of intersection of street ministry and social justice activism and the arts. And these are all things which are a bit marginal, a bit ragged, which are on the edge of chaos. It's easy to be on the edge of chaos in Kensington Market. And we're trying to create a church for this community, for my community, a church which is unafraid and vulnerable, which isn't committed to a particular bourgeois kind of niceness with which the Anglican Church is sometimes identified, which is open to complexity and challenge and is okay with the scruffy edges, which is a home for difficult passions, which is trying to be the shape of a radically inclusive community, a community which welcomes and supports and strengthens people who in all kinds of different ways are building the kingdom in the world. As I was leaving last night to go to another community meeting, the Sacred Heart Jam, our Thursday night drop-in, was starting up, and there were some people who were sorting seeds for the Toronto Seed Library and other people running a vegetarian potluck, and some people were meditating in the chancel, and one guy had a guitar and was making up some song about Jesus, and it was all lovely, chaotic, fun, strange, scruffy, kind of wonderful. We serve breakfast to between 200 and 300 marginalized and low-income people every weekend. We've started a morning prayer after that service where people who are guests at the breakfast can come and talk about what the gospel for the day means in the context of their lives. We've got our Fresh Expression service, Bread and Honey, on Saturday nights. And I'd like to read a little bit about something one of my Bread and Honey parishioners wrote. I asked a few people to tell me what they thought I should say here. I think about my experience of Bread and Honey, and I like the way the circle stays open. People wander in and join in. Sometimes they don't add a perspective tremendously grounded in reality. But the circle stays open. When I think about the non-denominational evangelical churches I attended in the UK, so much effort was put into bringing people through the doors. At St. Stephen's, there can be an in-depth, complex, technical conversation about the work of a long-dead poet or a controversial saint, something that friends of mine would hesitate before agreeing to come to. And people will wander in off the street, plonk down in a chair, and listen along until they have something to say. Or actually occasionally take over the whole evening, and if we had time, I would tell you the story of Hat Man, but I don't have time. But It's a great story. Ask me about Hat Man. There's something very essentially lovely in that, said my parishioner. Expressive of love, creative of love, and challenging all present to act with love. Another of my parishioners came up with the wonderful phrase of, what I've been trying to say, it doesn't sound quite right, is it's welcoming without being welcoming. It's like you don't have to make a big deal of welcoming people because everyone is already part of the community. And sometimes they happen to come in. Another person said what I like is that being a trans person is actually no big deal, either in a negative way or in a, hey, we're so cool, we even welcome trans people kind of way. It just is. Welcoming without being welcoming is a phrase I like. We do a lot of arts. We do a lot of, I think, what would sometimes be considered complicated and experimental art. We did a staging of Revelation with the angels in hazmat suits. It was John of Patmos was brilliant, the ultimate. We did an installation for Nuit Blanche, which actually struck me as having a bit in common with the title of the synod, because it was a lot of often quite old, quite classical, quite ancient musical and literary pieces which were put together in a very strange experimental contemporary context and ran all night and had interesting reactions, interesting responses, neat stuff going on. And to me, it is one of the examples of what we do when we try to create these intersections, this open, vulnerable, complicated, challenging space. This space in which everything fits in some weird, unpredictable, unmanageable sort of way. I would like to play, if the technology works, and I hope it does, and it's my fault if it doesn't, just a very short clip from a documentary which a friend made about our Nuit Blanche installation. And it is one little example. It'll show you a little bit of what we did in the installation and a little bit of how people responded. So if we can play that now, that would be great.
I actually remember the first year that we did this, there was a man who came with his daughter, and it was just as we'd gotten started, and we were all sort of trying to figure out what we were doing and feel for the effect. And he turned my light off, and he came up to me and he said, my daughter doesn't go to church with me and my wife, but she just stood in the middle here for 10 minutes. I don't know if you saw, and she said, "Daddy, this sounds like God." I thought, that's an interesting thing, especially from a child, to say. It's sort of the thing you can't quite grasp, the unexpected beauty, all sorts of almost tired phrases about how we interact with the divine. I mean, I really don't mean to put too much emphasis on that, what it is that we did, which is fun too. Yeah. But it is interesting how people react to unexpected beauty in that way.